yeah, what we're seeing in the market, we regularly asked how people can get the most out of their travel program. Companies want to travel, but they want to make sure that they're getting the most out of their spend. So I wanted to highlight some of the trends, where the opportunities are, and land on a few takeaways. The headline from our data this year is that we've seen customers traveling more, not less. So this is based on the financial year, so April 2025 through to March of this year. And we have bookings are up 10% and number of travellers up 4% across our New Zealand client base. And we might have had some interesting economic times, and it sounds like we've got some even more interesting economic times that are going to be coming up, but companies are absolutely travelling more. And interestingly, we've had a slight swing too, with more people travelling trans-Tasman and a slight drop in domestic travel. So it's not just that companies are travelling more, but they're also travelling a little bit further afield. And this made me consider, what's driving that? We haven't seen a huge increase in travel budget, so how are companies kind of making the most of what they're spending on travel? And the big factor I've pulled from looking over the data is choice. That would be my kind of key word for the last financial year. Being in New Zealand, we're a smaller market. We don't have quite as much choice as some of the other countries, but Kiwi businesses are still making the most of it. Which brings me to airfares. So this is the most expensive domestic seat that we saw in 2025. And I don't think it was anyone in this room, but so it was a one-way ticket from Auckland to Queenstown, and it was with Jetstar. So yeah, quite a high price. And this airfare is indicative of what we're seeing in the market with dynamic pricing. So previously, hotels were kind of masters at this. When it got busy, when a concert's on, you'd see the room rates really ramping up. The airlines did it a little bit. As it got busier, their prices would increase, but it was more of a steady kind of slow bump up. Whereas these days, we're seeing a lot more what they call the dynamic pricing. When it starts to get busy, the algorithms kick in. Both our main domestic carriers ramp up the prices significantly, and you really get punished for those last-minute bookings. And so you end up with prices like this. And from that, we've seen that there's been a shift in market share. So more Kiwis choosing to travel Jetstar on those marine routes. It's still predominantly Air New Zealand, but we've seen a 4% shift from Air New Zealand on the Auckland-Wellington, 5% on Auckland-Christchurch. And that's the biggest shift we've seen in market share in recent years. And it's all coming back to that dynamic pricing and choice. Because often the prices between Air New Zealand and Jetstar is within $40 or $50 of each other. It's reasonably easy to justify traveling with a preferred carrier, maybe if you've got corridor access, that you'll go with them. But when the dynamic pricing kicks in and that difference starts to be $300, $400, $500, that's when we're starting to see our customers having a break point where they say, actually, when it gets to over this particular point, either, we're not going to possibly do that trip, or you can take the option and you're going to be flying with Jetstar, because it's very hard to quantify that extra cost, especially on those shorter trips. And that's despite the on-time performance, because Jetstar and Air New Zealand used to be kind of neck and neck on their on-time performance. But actually at the start of this year, Air New Zealand had pulled ahead quite a bit on what Jetstar's been doing. And again, this highlights the choice side. Customers are aware of price versus reliability, but they're still, looking at that cost, making the choice that's right for them. People know that they might have a slight delay on the Jetstar flight, but sometimes that's going to be the right price to actually get them down there. Otherwise, it can justify the cost of going with the other airline. And that's kind of taking a look at that holistic look of the trip, who's traveling, what they're traveling for, and what's important. Because we're seeing that on the international side, that there's been a slight increase in premium economy travel coming out of economy. Business class has been flat year on year, but with the premium economy up, it is that with customers looking at the whole cost of the trip. When you've got someone out of your business, it's normally quite an expense going over to do something. There's a specific reason that they're traveling for. And we're seeing a few more businesses prioritizing that they're going to arrive ready to go on the ground, being refreshed and being able to do their job. In saying that, I'm still trying to convince Ange that I should really be flying business class for my trips, and I have not been successful. So, you're still going to look at the cost versus benefit on it. But we are seeing that slight change in how companies are deciding which carrier to go with. So I've gone ahead too quickly here. For flights, the big thing that we kind of want to look at is with your travel policy, what makes sense on that cutover? Is there a point when it's going to be worthwhile to look at traveling with Jetstar in New Zealand, and also looking at that whole cost of the trip? Who's going to be out of the business? What are they trying to do? What does it cost to the business to have them, doing their meeting customers, doing whatever they're going to be organising, and what kind of price do you put on that whole ticket? For accommodation, again, we're seeing choice playing a big part too, with even more options being available and booked by our customers. Every city, we've seen a significant jump in the number of accommodation options that have been booked. So got the numbers up there for how many unique accommodation. I didn't even know there was actually 117 places in Christchurch that you could stay in, but apparently there are. And it's been a huge jump from last year as well. And this is where we're seeing that choice come in as well, that we've got customers, if they want to stay at a little motel that's got a kitchenette out in Papakura, then we can organise that for them. If they want to stay at the wonderful Park Hyatt, then we can organise that for them. But companies are able to make the right choice for their people travelling. And there seems to be an understanding from staff as well that if they're going on a business trip, then sometimes it might be that they're in a motel in the middle of nowhere, because that's right next to where they're going to be staying. It's for what they're going to be doing. It works well, and it's within the budget. And so that makes sense for the trip. So the upside on this is that you are getting the right property for the right price in the right location. The downside is the consolidation side. So if you've got 40 different Auckland properties that have been booked and absorbing your hotel nights, then no single hotel is getting that relationship. And I've people coming up regularly to me asking about, hotel contracts and what can be organised. And when you've got that big spread out, then it makes it harder. But it can also be harder for your staff if they're staying at completely different places each time. When you start at the same hotel and you build up that relationship, you know where to eat around there, all the places, that it can just make your travel experience a little bit nicer as well. But overall, we're seeing customers kind of broadening their horizons on what accommodation options work for them. And with our travel data, I'm really interested in benchmarking. So we look across industry benchmarks to see what makes sense for your industry. And this information is really important for our customers, or in general, for when you're working on your travel program goals. And again, it comes down to that choice. Like if you want to have your travel budget go further, then the core recommendations are book early, never ever change it, and stay in the cheapest hotel you can possibly find. But that doesn't make sense for most customers. If you're in construction and last minute bookings are absolutely going to happen, then it doesn't make sense to be hammering home, we've got to book 30 days out all the time. You're just going to pay loads of change costs. It's not worth it. There's other areas that you should be focusing on to get that benefit. Same if you're in finance and insurance and you're staying in some very nice hotels, then there's other areas of the policy that you should be looking at for saving. Maybe you're buying flexi change tickets and flexi refund. Maybe you're getting those hotel contracts that are going to actually save you money at the front end. So if you want to get more out of your travel program, then it's really important to have a look at benchmarking, to know what makes sense for your industry and incorporate that in. And so that it's a plan that actually fits what you're trying to achieve. Which leads me to the top 3 recommendations I have for getting the most out of your travel program. Now, these are the things I see again and again with our customers when they've really nailed travel. Big thing is that it's got to be led from the top. There needs to be a senior stakeholder who is either involved in the travel program or the exec team need to actually follow the travel policy, because that makes a massive difference to have compliance flow through the rest of the company. Visibility is really important. I know that every booking I make is going to be looked over. And if I'm not on that Jetstar 6 a.m. flight down to Christchurch, then someone is going to be asking me why, and I'll need to justify it. And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't, but it's going to definitely be checked on. But also, dashboard reporting that instantly shows what people are booking if they're outside policy. And you don't need to make a big song and dance out this. Like most staff members, they want to do the right thing. They want to book, what they're supposed to. But if they know no one's checking, if they know that it's just going to go through no matter what, then they'll get away with what they can. Which leads to communication, making sure that everyone understands the travel policy, knows why it's in place, knows what rules they can follow, has those guardrails just to make everything run smoother. And with that comes gentle reminders. Like we've got Matariki and King's birthday coming up, sending a reminder, these holidays are happening. have people book their travel. Some people have trips every week, and suddenly they are shocked when, these big holidays or different things happen. And like I said, with that dynamic pricing, it gets crazy. I was reminded yesterday that in November, we've got multiple big concerts that are coming that all of Auckland is just going to get booked out. And so having, those reminders out to people, you can still travel at that time, but you do not want to be booking a couple of days out because you'll be on that $1,200 flight. So having those reminders makes a huge difference as well.